So back in the 30s, my father went to camp on Tobin Island, a camp run by Brian and Alan Vaughn at Linger Longer. Cottage is still there, owned by the Vaughns, a conglomerate of 4 or 5 cottages now. And while he was there, he used to see boats like the Fancy Lady, and which was called the Undine at the time. Undine, just by the way, is a very fancy water nymph and a lovely flowing gown if you look it up on the internet. After he went off to war and came back, got married, started a family. A good friend of his said, "Come on, Bob, we're going to go up to Keswick to look at a boat that I want to buy." It was a twin screw grew of some sort. This fellow placed on Georgian Bay at the time. Father said, "Great, it'd be a nice day trip." So they go up there. While they're looking at this twin screw grew, which ended up inappropriate, there was a boat on a trailer under some canvas, and my father asked, "Oh, let's have a look at this. What's this over here?" And they opened it up, and by God, it was an 18-foot Minette Shields Gentleman's Racer. It was the Undine itself, which had been owned by Phil Seagram, who was killed during the war, unfortunately, and his family had sold it to Dawson's. Dawson's wanted $500 for the boat. My father didn't have $500. He said, "What happens if you take the engine out? How much do you want?" And they said $100. He says, "A deal." The trailer was included. The boat was towed back down to Toronto, and it sat in our driveway for a year or so. This was 1949, as I recall. In 1950, they bought the piece of property that we have our cottage on, and in 1951 started restoring the Fancy Lady. Some self-restoration, but mostly it was done by Herb Budd. Now, a really interesting story is that Father had all of the chrome fittings in the back of his car halfway through this project, and he was going to take them to a chroming place in Toronto. The car was stolen, never recovered, so all the fittings were lost. He spent the next year going to Hideaway Island looking at the RJ. He met Charlie Wheaton because of this. He'd go up to his place on Lake Joe. And the Harley Nielsen's, who happened to be a friend of my grandfather's. And all the fittings were made from wooden patterns carved by my father, who was actually a pretty good carver. The boat was eventually powered by a Chrysler Crown. That was one of the original engines. The gray Phantom, 96 horsepower, was the other engine that went in some of the boats. And that was our mode of transportation for quite a few years. Because the boat had sat out for so long, there was some issues with the hull. And in 1957, 58, somewhere in there, new sides and bottom were put on by the Ames brothers, mostly because the Ames brothers had a line on some very fine mahogany. I think some of it was even African mahogany, which was pretty much dead by then. But they were building a big boat for Doug Brown up in Lake Joe, and they had extra wood, and so my father got a deal for them to do the Fancy Lady at the same time. The decks, by the way, are original. The engine been rebuilt a couple of times. It's now got an interceptor in it, thanks to a Jack Titstall. It has Thunderbird intake manifold and a 4-barrel carburetor sitting on top of the engine, which is a lot safer than the original Carter's 2 barrels at either end of the block that came with the original Interceptor. My father died 40 years ago. I've been looking after the boat ever since.